Hey guys, Shah here, and today I'm back with my Guardian Druid for my first ever guide series for Mythic Plus. It's been a few weeks since I've posted anything serious about Guardian Druid since patch 8.3 went live, and this is simply because I've been just spending a lot of time, building my credentials, climbing the ladder of Mythic Plus so that I can bring you guys applicable knowledge and not just me talking out of my ass. With constant nerfs and changes to corruption, I felt like it was hard to justify spending time talking about something that may be irrelevant a day later. Cough cough, echoing void. Also, this patch has been really busy between Mythic Plus, progression rating, and general day-to-day stuff like dailies, so first and foremost, my apology for this taking so long to be published. But without rambling on too long, let's dive into this overview. I want to get a few things out of the way. This video is meant to be a TLDR for those who hate my extremely long fluff-filled rants. I want to quickly go over the essentials of Guardian Druid and cover all of its bases in a short period of time. This series will then continue with extremely lengthy breakdowns of each section discussed in this video, and those sections will include talents, Azerite traits, essences, secondary stats, corruptions, and then the synergies that it has with other classes. Just because I don't mention or discuss something in this video does not mean it's not viable or worth using, but simply I'm trying to keep it short and sweet, and that it will more than likely be discussed in the very near future. Also, I do want to note that this is a relatively opinionated video, and it is based on my experience and data gathered playing at the top end of the ladder for Guardian Druid. I don't know everything there is to know, and I would love to have appropriate discourse in the comment section below, because I always love a good theory craft. So, let's get started. So first we're going to be taking a look at talents. Just keep in mind that when I'm discussing these talents, there is a lot of freedom in almost every tier to choose what benefits your playstyle. I may skip over a few talents or briefly mention them, and if this is the case, just like I said before, I'm just kind of going over what is standard, and those may change, and I'll break it down in a future video. So for your first tier, the level 15 bracket, you're going to be taking Brambles or Blood Frenzy, kind of depending on your choice. Brambles is always a safe pick, and Blood Frenzy is also actually a fairly safe pick as well. The rage gen you're going to get with Blood Frenzy is going to help you on weeks like Necrotic when you're needing to kite and generate some additional rage while kiting. Brambles is going to be good in more magical dungeons where you're going to be taking a lot of casts because it does reflect those casts. So it's both are very viable. I don't really have a recommendation on either or, so take which one fits your playstyle best. In our tier 2 or our level 30, we're looking at Ursal's Vortex. This is normally the best choice in this talent tier. Wild Charge and Tiger's Dash just aren't optimal in Mythic Plus environment, simply just due to the damage taken per second uptime while tanking. Not often are you able to go into cat form without taking a large chunk of damage. So just kind of keep that in mind if you are going to play Wild Charge or Tiger's Dash. In our tier 3, which is our 45 or level 45 talent row, Restoration Affinity is just arguably the only useful choice for dungeons. Ysera's Gift is just extremely overpowered for Guardian Druid simply due to your maximum health being one of the highest in game, and then just the trait in general will give you an additional like 4k HPS over the course of a dungeon, which is insane. So for our tier 4, which is our level 60, Typhoon is normally going to be your best option since it could double as a kiting method by creating a gap between you and the things that are hitting you in the face. And then Entangling Roots and Mighty Bash are kind of more niche choices. It depends on composition for Mighty Bash. If you don't have a lot of stuns, this might be a good choice for your group. And Mass Root can be used in some dungeons like Temple of Sethralis and King's Rest in certain points, but I'll talk more about this again when I'm talking about talents in a future video breakdown. Our tier 5, which is our 75 row, this is your offensive row. Soul of the Force will mostly be ignored, so Galactic Guardian and Incarnation are your best two choices. If you're looking for more overall damage, Galactic Guardian is probably a safer bet, but having Incarnation as kind of a bigger cooldown to use as both a defensive cooldown and as offensive cooldown, just a very, very strong choice. I prefer Incarnation over Galactic Guardian, but again, it comes down to preference. In our tier 6, which is our level 90 talent row, this is a fairly strong defensive row, but at the end of the day, it comes down to preference. But Earth Warden is going to be your strongest choice, which scales highest with key level. So Earth Warden in lower level keys is going to be a lot weaker and more in line, but as you start getting into like the 15 or higher key mark, Earth Warden scales dramatically because it's going to be a 30% damage reduction of auto attacks, and obviously, as you guys know for doing Mythic Plus, keys scale up every time you go up a key level. So again, this is going to be a flat percentage of damage reduction on most on auto attacks. So just again, very, very strong talent. But again, I'll break down the other two and why they might be good choices in a future video. And then lastly, our tier 7, which is our level 100 talent row. Honestly, very disappointed with this row. It's because there's no good choices in here besides Run and Tear. And it sucks because it takes time to ramp up in combat, about 12 seconds. of ramp time before you get the full effect of it. So again, pretty poor row, but Rend and Tear is going to be your only good take for the most part in dungeons. So when it comes to Azerite traits, there really isn't much to talk about. At higher end gameplay, you'll be wanting to focus on doing as much damage as possible while being as tanky as possible. Lucky for Guardian Druids, many of our Azerite traits are super good. They have both an offensive and defensive use, and because I will be breaking them down in a future video, I'm just going to give you kind of a small target list here. So stacking Twisted Claws is one of your best options. The amount of agility it's going to give you, it's just absolutely insane, and it has a really good synergy with Incarnation if you're taking that talent choice. It has a really good synergy with Rend and Tear, another good talent choice, and then also has a good synergy with our essences that we like to run, which I will be obviously covering in a bit, but Vision of Perfection is a major that a lot of Guardian Druids like to play with. So again, just having Twisted Claws is going to give you insane uptime on both agility, and agility then leads to, you know, chance to dodge, essentially both offensive and defensive properties that are just going to scale dramatically with this trait. So you're going to want to stack as many of these as possible. Some players like to play with 2, some players like to play with 3. It just depends on how much you can get. The percentage it procs doesn't change, but per stack, but the amount of agility it awards. So if you have 3 stacks at like a heroic eye level or higher, you're going to be getting like 3 or 4k agility out of this, which is just absolutely insane. So then there's pretty much outside of that, like Layered Mane is a good choice. It gives a little bit of agility. It gives you a little bit better mitigation and keeping higher stacks of Iron Fur. But not all Guardian Druids play with this. Some people like to play with 1. Some people play with 2 for the extra agility, but I would only recommend 1. If you're looking at a list to target, I would say 3 Twisted Claws, 1 Iron Fur, and then the rest you can really fill with whatever you want. So there are some ones that are outside of the Guardian Druid tree that are a selection that are also pretty strong. The talent Waking Dream for Resto Druids is pretty good with synergy with our Resto affinity, giving us absolutely insane Ysera's Gift healing. And then also Power of the Moon to amplify our Moonfire that we're going to be using if we're taking Galactic Guardian as a talent. Both very strong Azerite traits. But outside of that, you can fill those last 2 slots or last 3 slots with kind of whatever you want. But again, Twisted Claw is definitely the thing to aim for, and probably 1 Layered Mane. Essences, it's a little bit more of a gray area because there's a lot of Guardian Druids who will play around using different essences. The essences that I've seen a lot of tanks using would be Anima of Life and Death, Crucible of the Flame, and Vision of Perfection. These are probably your top 3 majors that you're going to see. Anima of Life and Death, solid AoE damage. It's really good at gathering threat pretty consistently, especially if you're playing without rogues and or with very high burst DPS like Demon Hunters or Warriors. So very strong essence. Also a pretty good heal. Again, though, this will flex on the week because Anima of Life and Death is going to be pretty rough to use on like Necrotic Week, for example. So it really just depends on your composition and the affixes. Crucible of the Flame is going to give you a little bit more higher single target yield for damage. So it's really good on Tyrannical weeks, or if you're looking to kind of push out a little bit more damage, priority damage. And it can also act as a heal for your allies. So if your healer might be a little weaker, or it depends on your composition, Crucible of the Flame is very strong with that. And then, like I mentioned earlier, my favorite to run is Vision of Perfection. The proc of having the chance to proc Incarn is absolutely insane. It's a 15% increased armor. They remove the cooldown on Mangle, and Mangle now hits 3 targets. You can now spam Thrash. Thrash is extremely strong with the synergy with Rend and Tear, with Twisted Claws Azerite traits, and with Earth Warden. And then your taunt is on a 1.5 second cooldown, down from an 8 second cooldown, so really good on skittish weeks when this procs. So just a really strong essence. But again, it's a proc, so it's not always going to be up, but because they buffed it going into 8.3, you're seeing a lot higher uptime on Incarnation in this patch. So those are the 3 that I recommend. You can there's other ones you can play around with. I'm going to talk about it again in another video, hopefully coming out in the next couple weeks. Those are the main 3. So when you're looking at minors are fairly locked in. You're going to be making sure you're going to have Conflict and Strife. This is pretty much a must. This comes from Arena. It's going to give you a pretty strong flat amount of verse. I think it goes up to about 5% at 8 stacks. 5% verse, give or take, depending on how it scales with your class. I think it scales the same for everyone, but I'm not sure on that. But it's about 5% verse, which is just like a flat 2.5% damage reduction, and it's an increase to your overall damage. So just super strong. And then you're going to use Nullification Dynamo. This is from Mechagon. This allows us to fill in the lack of mitigation, magic mitigation, with a magic absorb and then the damage reflection on top of that. So just super strong essence. I recommend running this almost all the time, unless you're going into a key like Freehold, then you don't need to run it. There's not a lot of magical damage from there. So a couple other ones you can replace or play around with is Strength of the Warden. I made a video a couple weeks ago kind of predicting that this was going to be a very, very weak essence, but it turns out it's insanely strong, both with the heal that it gives, but also having increased health is awesome, especially when it's scaling into some corruptions. Hint, hint, Twilight Devastation. And then also the corruption resistance that it gives is really, really strong. So I always run Strength of the Warden. I always run Conflict, and then the last one will be Nullification Dynamo. Aegis of the Deep if you're going to be pulling fairly large pulls, so like Waycrest Manor, Freehold, or I'll use like Anima of Life and Death as a minor, and if I'm not using it as a major. The additional stacks of health and healing that it gives is just pretty nice to have in a key. So pretty much, I know it's kind of rambling, just to recap, it's, I would say, Vision of Perfection Major, and then Strength of the Warden, Conflict, and Strife are always slotted, with the last jumping between Anima, Aegis, and Nullification Dynamo. So when it comes to stat weights, I made a video a few weeks ago talking about, or last patch talking about stat weights and what I prefer. There's been a lot of questions on a few of my YouTube videos asking, you know, some people are saying these two stat weights are really good, but then they're seeing different people running different stat weights and through different sources. So I'm hoping this kind of clears it up. So in almost all circumstances, item level is king. Agility and stamina are by far going to be your highest return value on stats. So I know those aren't secondary stats, they're primary stats, but again, item level then. So when it comes down to it then, once you're at an item level that you feel like you're kind of peaking at, so whether you're, you know, doing your 15s and getting, you know, 465 item level, or, you know, you're just doing 10s and getting your 10s done, once you feel like you've reached that item level point where you can't go up any higher, that's when you're going to start rounding out your secondary stats. So for the most part, haste can be ignored completely. It has a little bit of offensive value, but little is gained defensively from this stat. So I would say Verse, Mastery, and Crit all have some type of value offensively and defensively, with versatility and crit scaling highest with key difficulty. So there are two common builds that you're going to see. You're going to see a Verse Mastery focus build, which is going to focus on damage reduction and healing, and then you're going to see the other build being a Verse Crit build, and this is going to try to have your damage scale into the versatility, and the critical strike is going to give you increased dodge chance. So at the start of pulls are going to be a lot less dangerous when you have higher crits, but you're going to have to learn how to kite more often. So Mastery is a little bit more, I'm going to just kind of brute force it and take hits to the face, where Crit is going to be more of a kind of a weaving in and out of combat, trying to reset that dodge DR. So I'm going to, again, break down these two builds entirely in a future video, so look out for that, but that's kind of in a whole. So item level is king, so agility and stamina are pretty much at the top, and then you either kind of pick if you want to go kind of Verse Mastery or Verse Crit. Corruptions are finally at a point that I feel like I can confidently say which are kind of best in slot and which ones you should be aiming for and which ones you should pretty much ignore. So the few corruptions that are very, very strong right now, for tanks especially, are Twilight Devastation and Echoing Void. Echoing Void was nerfed significantly multiple times, just absolutely slash. I was pushing keys and got my Keystone Master pre-nerf, and it was amazing because Echoing Void used to not split damage, and then they nerfed it to split damage, and then they nerfed it by 20%, and then they nerfed it again by an additional 50%. So it's been nerfed a handful of times over the last few weeks. But because corruption resistance is getting higher, we can now stack more Echoing Void, resulting in still pretty good, you know, dishes out of damage. And on single target Echoing Void, while it's proccing, will be critting for like 30 to 40k, depending on, you know, procs and stuff like that. So still a pretty good single target and AoE essence. I like Echoing Void because I don't have to worry about it pulling through a wall like Twilight Devastation can, but Twilight Devastation will, in return, it'll return more overall damage for a key. So Twilight Devastation is definitely something to aim for if you're looking for damage. Echoing Void isn't bad, it's still good on tanks. I don't want people to think that it's not good on tanks anymore. Yes, it's been nerfed multiple times, and yes, I'm really sad about it because now I can't do high mask visions, but still very strong. Outside of those, if you're just not having good luck, and just because you don't have a Twilight Devastation doesn't mean you can't compete and do higher end keys. There are corruptions that give you versatility from all sources, or versatility procs while taking damage are very, very strong as well. Verse is a very strong stat for Guardian Druids, both with damage reduction and for dealing increased damage. So look out for those. Same with Mastery. So Mastery from all sources. Don't look for Mastery procs as much, but Mastery from all sources, if you're going into a Mastery build, is also very strong. Mastery not only increases their overall health, but it also increases their attack power, and then attack power leads into dodge. So there's even though you have like these non-damaging, or at least upfront damaging corruptions, still doesn't mean that they're not good. And then same with that, like crit from all sources. So if you have those stats from all sources, are still really good. Mastery scales the best because a lot of Guardian Druid Azurite traits give you mastery, and then that mastery from all sources will amplify those corruptions. So there are other ones like Infinite Stars. Infinite Stars is okay, but for dungeons it's really not that great because it'll never stack up high enough unless you're maybe doing like high-end Tyrannical. But even then, you're better off taking like Twilight Devastation or Echoing Void. So those are kind of the 4 or 5 that I recommend getting. A lot of the other ones are kind of like crap, like Haste procs or Haste from all sources, not that great. Void Ritual, if your whole group has Void Ritual, is okay because then you're getting kind of a good chunk of secondary stats. But again, so crit, verse, and mastery from all sources, verse proc, or the damage and corruption. So Echoing Void or Twilight Devastation are gonna be the ones you're gonna be searching for. All right, we're gonna finish this video with our synergies. So synergies is something that it's kind of an odd section. If you guys watch Stratnos at all, he's one of my favorite YouTubers to watch currently in the WoW community. I just think he's very knowledgeable and I love his dad humor. But essentially, synergies are things that we work well with, and he also talks about sometimes tensions, which is things that we don't work well against. But I don't think there's a lot of tensions, and I really kind of want to highlight things you might want to be looking for. And that I don't want to discriminate because we're already playing a class that gets discriminated, so I don't want to discriminate against other classes. So healers that you're going to be looking to run with are going to include Holy Paladins and Resto Druids, 2 very strong meta healers currently, but also work very well with the toolkit of Guardian Druid and the damage profile of Guardian Druid that we're taking throughout the course of a dungeon. A lot of times it's very soft damage that we're going to be healing back, so Glimmer of Light and Hots both work very well with that, and then also on-demand spot healing that those classes can provide when our Frenzied Regen is down or when we take a pretty big burst of damage on the start of pulls are very, very good to have. So Resto Druid and Holy Paladin, definitely 2 very, very strong healers for Guardian Druids. So when it comes to DPS synergies, there's actually a lot of classes that work very well with Guardian Druid and the way that Guardian Druid has to play, no matter what build we're in. So some of our caster synergies are going to look like Priests, Boomkins, and Shamans. So breaking this down, just Priests like the way that Guardian Druids pull. Guardian Druids like to chain pull often because when we have to go into a pull we weren't in combat, so when we don't have maximum rage and we don't have Iron Furs already rolling, the pull is going to be significantly more harder to start than it is to continue. A lot of tanks can't continue pulling and chain pulling because they need their charges of mitigation to, refresh, where Guardian Druids can just keep going and pulling and pulling. So Priests work very well with this just with their build, and also having the ability to fade is awesome because for whatever reason, if they do pull threat, they can drop it fairly easily and the Guardian Druid can pick it back up. Boomkins, a lot of casters that need time to kind of ramp up are really strong. So Boomkins are one of those classes that kind of need to get their dots rolling. They need to get, they need to stack up their astral power before they can start prioritizing one target down. Or if you happen to pull big enough and they starfall at like 65 plus targets, that might be a thing as well. But Boomkins, because of their priority target and they're kind of just very soft damage on the rest of the group, you can hold aggro pretty easily from Boomkins. And Shamans are really strong because they're pretty... a lot of their damage is... they have fairly good burst damage, so it can work against Guardian Druids, but they also have a lot of ways to keep things off of them. Things like Thunderstorm and Earthbind Totem, and they have an AoE stun. So having things like this allow the Guardian Druid to maintain aggro and to kite if needed. So dropping an Earthbind Totem when the Guardian Druid's trying to refresh their dodge DR, for example. Very, very strong. Hunters and Rogues having the ability to misdirect is extremely strong, or Tricks of the Trade, but we just call it misdirection or MD. So having them be able to pass aggro is extremely awesome because then you don't have to worry about snagging it on pull. Frost Mages, same reason as Shamans, very, very strong because they're constantly slowing everything. I like playing with Frost Mages because it's super easy for me to kite and get away, reset dodge GR, go back in. Very good synergy with also the talent Blood Frenzy. So Frost Mages, very fun to play with. Frost DKs and Paladins, it's nice having a DPS in the group with a taunt to taunt certain mobs off of you in case, like in King's Rest, for example, like the bleed that the mobs at the back half of the dungeon put on the tank. A Frosty Care Paladin can taunt off and bubble or AMS or whatever they need to do to mitigate that damage, and then they can help out and assist in tanking. And they can also pull mobs off of other DPS or healers if you happen to lose aggro for whatever reason, because Guardian Druid things. Paladins also have, lay on hands and things like that, and Frosty Case have grip, helping rounding up mobs. Just all around, these are probably the best DPS that a Guardian Druid can run with, and have a lot of synergy with the Guardian Druid toolkit. So that pretty much sums up, as tight as I can. I'm trying to gather all my thoughts and what the Guardian Druid toolkit and what the builds look like. This is kind of an all-in-one. That's my goal. So I'm going to be bringing very long-ranted future videos breaking down each section. So if you do have specific questions, make sure to leave it in the comment section below so I can cover that before I start recording, and so I don't have to go back and record over the video and do a bunch of editing with that. So I hope this guide helps. I hope it helps you start building out your Guardian Druid. I know they're becoming fairly popular. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next one.